And so just to kickstart the discussion, so this panel is a panel which is more like a open forum for everyone who is interested in egocentric perception to have a say about what they think is missing. And in terms of, let's say, data sets, what data sets you wish you had, or what methods you think are still needed to be developed in egocentric perception. And then as part of this discussion, what can this series of workshops, the EPIC at X, where X can be any conference that is related to perceptual vision or interaction and computing. What can this series do?
You are kind of not very readable, so
you cannot read the slides.
But yeah, I think we can kind of rely on what you're saying, which is fine.
Yeah, so there is nothing more than these 2 points. Well, 3 points introductions, which we already did.
So everybody is welcome to join the panel, and just
yes,
kind of raise your hand. We'll be able to unmute you, and you can comment on aspects. Note that we have EPIC at ECCV. Actually, the deadline for submitting to the ECCV version, which has proceedings, is the 10th of July. So there's an opportunity for people to still submit. But if there is something you'd like to see in the full day workshop, in the full day workshop, we will be able to take your comments on board and implement them. Otherwise, we'll end up doing exactly what we already did. So it's your chance to kind of introduce new ideas and make changes.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear
you.
Yes,
please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, but I think you got hear us.
I can hear you now.
Right, good.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. Yes, I tried to switch to a different band on my router just in case, but it didn't work. So we can stick with this one.
So I think we can review the things we presented. So this time we went for 2 keynote speakers. We had this idea about presenting these proposals and giving people the opportunity to get funded for their own choice of data sets on egocentric perception in general. And we also had the speakers from the challenge winners. We had the poster presentation. So it's very much getting your input on the current version of the workshop, but also other things you would like to see that we might not even have thought of. That might be relevant to your work. It'd be good to hear from you why you're with us in this workshop today. What is it that you're doing? What aspects of the egocentric perception excites you? And I think it's either raising your hand or putting a question on the chat.
What could be useful to cover in terms of topics or data you need to share, or how we can share to the community better?
We understand it's a tricky thing to do these with virtual presences, but we do have people on the call that I hope would want to contribute.
So probably we can start discussing some question around us, and people can join. What do you think, Walter?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, and a question for you, which is a question for you. You are very expert in the field of active vision and perception, vision perception. Do you think we have to start to invite and also push some topics about active vision, putting some kind of robotics and in joins with first-person vision, purely first-person vision in the field? Is to start discussing on some ideas.
Well, I'm very glad that you asked that question, Giovanni, because I don't know if you know, but actually my PhD was on active vision.
Yeah, exactly.
And active vision has been around since late 70s, really, and maybe earlier if you take into account all the psychophysical work that has been happening in terms of trying to understand how vision works. And I think when we are in a computer vision conference, sometimes we forget that vision was actually developed in a world where you needed to act. I mean, vision was developed for you to be able to act. Not only to be able to segment and to do all the other interesting things that we can do in terms of vision algorithms, but the vision existed there in order to act, in order to react to the world, and in order to also be what is called economical in terms of how you're perceiving. There are some extremely interesting works in terms of trying to see how vision will be different if our eyes didn't move, if our eyes had to sense everywhere. And if that was the case, you will end with eyes that will be the size of a house if you have to have the same resolution everywhere. And clearly, because of these requirements of you having to act in the world, then vision needs to take care of that and it needs to account for that. So I absolutely think that we need to bring more about active vision. And I think some of the work that is happening, even within the remits of segmentation and attention in networks, is going in that direction. But I still think that there is much more that we can do in order to try to bring back the connection of vision in an acting world. And I think that certainly is something that is not only going to help us to understand vision in its wider context, but it's also going to make us develop vision that is more relevant and useful.
Thank you. Dima, do you have your point of view about this?
It's difficult to, I think it's interesting to have a variety of different ways in looking at this type of data, or the data that is captured using wearable cameras. So from one aspect, you want to just understand what this person is doing, right? Just to kind of be on board, be the angel on the shoulder or the devil, whatever you're doing, right? Just follow people and know what they're doing. And then take your time to swallow and digest all your information. So not even kind of offer advice, immediate type of advice. So there is this kind of, let's just observe the world as people go around and perceive what they do. And so that also has its own scope and its own challenges. I think when we started working with some of the standard computer vision techniques, like say object detection from a wearable camera, the talk by Gedas today was like object detection was a solved problem, but in this case, it's not, right?
It was.
Yeah, exactly, it wasn't. So there is a lot that this type of footage brings to the traditional, let's say, computer vision questions. The long tail distribution of actions is something that none of the other action recognition datasets tend to even observe because of the way these datasets have been collected. So I think there is scope for both passive and active. Maybe active has its, let's say, its foot or its legs in multiple communities, and having EPIC as a workshop also in these multiple communities can bring these different types of people together to work. Well, Kristen today presented the spectrum of passive to active. And I think there is interest along the whole spectrum. I think Victor is saying this reminds him of the comment of why didn't plants develop eyes? Right, kind of.
I mean, yes, I think we can make a distinction between eyes and light sensitivity. Certainly, there are plants that are light sensitive. Sunflowers, for example, I mean, they do try to maximize the amount of energy they can collect by moving around and sensing where the best source of light is. And indeed, not every animal did develop eyes, but it's also worth highlighting that different animals develop different types of eyes. There is a beautiful book, if you're interested in on this topic, called Animal Eyes by Michael Land and Nielsen from Oxford University Press. It's a fantastic book that I fully recommend to everyone that is interested in.
We have a question that's more dataset oriented, I think, in the Q&A from
yes.
Washington Ramos saying, is it possible to have the full recipes, the dense description of steps in a future version of the dataset?
Yeah.
So it's important to understand what you mean by that, because we definitely have a dense.
I think he means maybe like a higher level.
Right.
Because like what you're trying to do in one of those like Epic Kitchens videos is, okay, maybe someone's making a curry and like the steps they needed to go, like the put down isn't like a goal orientated step.
I think this is a discussion that is always open, but in my head, once you've recognized all these individual steps, recipes can occur in the semantic space. I'm not sure how much they need of the low level space. Right? If I know that someone is opening a fridge and then picking up eggs and then cracking eggs and putting them in the pan, I think I'm not sure how much of the individual images do we need to answer that. But so that's kind of my take on it. But having provided these, I don't know what you call them, fine-grained object interactions, the question is, we can explore what either natural language can do for us or but we haven't, I think at some point in the first round, we did ask the people to specify what they've done in the whole video, but this is very much higher level. So also note that people switch recipes. They don't always like follow a recipe. People are very dynamic. They might kind of crack the egg and then go to wash the dishes. So it's a lot more than just the recipe, I would say. But I think if you want to elaborate more on that, you're very welcome to. We can also unmute for a more active discussion.
I also want to add to all that before Epic Kitchens and some other modern data sets in Egocentric Vision, everything was scripted. And this is the thing that made them less interesting in general, because you don't have the uncertainties, you don't have the realism. And I think that is a big step that the community is taking as a whole, of trying to move away from scripted expert system type descriptions of the world. And I think actually having to deal with these uncertainties is one of the main challenges that still remains.
Yeah.
But I fully understand if you want something like that for some sort of grand truthing or so on. But I fully agree with what Dima said. You can try to extract that from the complexity of the world, right, and impose it so that you actually get more realism.
It also is interesting to see how people deal with the data set. So some people deal with it as another action recognition data set, right? And they test something on kinetics and on Epic Kitchens. And some people deal with it as a completely different type of data set, doing something like what Kristen is doing with Egotop. So it's kind of, it's not yet very clear how people are dealing with it. People are using it for different reasons and for different purposes. And that's the nature of just collecting the data set, is that we just collected a data set, which is what people do. And then we thought about what type of challenges we can do with it. Shall we start collecting more data with sensors, basically going around besides audio and video? Besides audio and video. Human and animals have haptics. Yeah, our skin is an incredible sensor. And then no need to do homogeneous data. It would be great to have a heterogeneous data where some videos have sensors and others don't. Yeah, very interesting. I think the sensors are the issue. So we have always been looking at sensors that last more than 20 minutes, right? Because HoloLens, if you want to really capture the sensors after 20 minutes, it's like it's dead. The battery doesn't live. Also, we have the problem, which if you've seen Epic, you know how we mount the GoPro. It's really looking at the hands and all of these. Well, Terry is very familiar with all these types of, we tried all these aspects of these virtual setups that look ahead of you for gaming and don't capture anything to do with the hands. But yes, it would be great to capture haptics. If you can find any haptic that can work as you wash the dishes, I'd be very happy to start including it. But they are very, very far from being useful in daily life at the moment.
Also, one problem is the alignment of the tracks or the different sensors to be reliable and to be used for training and inference. Is not really easy. We don't have devices which provide everything aligned. There are some questions on the chats. For sure, we can acquire probably accelerometers on
we have
IMU,
accelerometers with
and we have in the new Epic Kitchens 100 we have those informations. But for other kind of sensors, will be very difficult, at least at the moment.
Yeah.
But probably in the future, who knows? There was not Epic Kitchens 10 years ago, right? And there was no possibility probably to use this kind of actions camera to acquire. So we are going that way. There are other questions, Dima, on the chat.
In response,
what about
Oswald is asking, can we go beyond recognition and anticipation? I think Mike can tell you about the retrieval challenge that uses the narration. So that's coming very soon. So we have a retrieval challenge.
So actually, there will be 6 challenges, Oswald, in the new data set. So you probably will hear about in the next webinar, will be the 1st of July.
We haven't considered VQA, but that's very interesting. I think if people want to develop their own challenges alongside Epic, that's part of the MTurk idea, right? If you want to annotate something on a data set, the idea is us to support looking beyond the standard CRIP recognition. We're doing anticipation, we're doing detection. We're still kind of retrieval. We're still kind of within the traditional challenges, but there is nothing, given that we extend the data set in size, there is nothing stopping us from adding more and more challenges. And if people, as I said, would like to define the challenge themselves, we would be very happy to.
There is also a question about narration, Dima, or making more use of narrations. The problem with narrations is...
So the retrieval challenge is making use of the narrations. That is, we're not using any of the clustered classes and the verbs and nouns. So we're using the free form narrations. And we're also using non-binary relevancy, which is fairly new for evaluating the retrieval challenge. I'm hoping I haven't messed up, Mike. He can correct me if I've done anything wrong, but I believe that's kind of the main idea, is that we believe that looking at the actual narration, it's not that if the narration is used with the exact video, then it's relevant, otherwise it's not relevant. One of the current limitations of retrieval approaches. VQA in particular, I think I'm very interested. It's not my area, but if someone wants to do VQA on Epic, I think there are a lot of questions, particularly on episodic memory and what people had seen and what they hadn't seen by the time in the video. Not something we're working on at the moment.
Yeah, there is another question from Michael, which say, how important do you think is that the method is able to generalize across third person and first person vision? Do you want to comment, Dima and Valterio, or Antonino, Hazel?
So can you repeat the question? Because I think I missed that.
Yeah, so how important is generalization among the methods should be able to generalize between first and third person vision?
I find third person lots of guessing. You don't see what the person is doing, particularly when it comes to object interactions. You have this viewpoint that's not ideal, and you're making lots of guesses. It's not really like person standing and you see it from the third person and the first person. Here we're talking about someone, I don't know, picking a fork from the drawer. What you can see from third person, in my opinion, is limited. We didn't collect third person because it was much easier to tell people that we're not capturing you, right? Once you say, I'm going to capture you as well as the first person, you're introducing all these issues with face, which we didn't want to be part of at the moment. That's why at the moment for us, it's not something we are looking into. But yeah, let's see. Victor is asking, how about?
Well, maybe just to say, because the question was, I think it's important to say and emphasize that the objective of vision is to be able to understand the world in general. I mean, and that includes all the different viewpoints. And there is a risk in computer vision at the moment because of the facility of putting together data sets of which we might be culprits ourselves, and methods that you can just download and run. There is a risk in computer vision of just generating these very basic, simple demos of something working. But being able to generalize has to be the ultimate objective of vision. So
generalize on another view,
that makes sense.
Well, it depends on the task you have to solve. If you have to understand the people, what the person is doing, of course, you can have information from both sides point of view, but for some point of view, you cannot see the person, as Dima say. But I agree also with what Valterio, that if you have to understand something from images, as we do, the point of view is not really important. That became important depending on what you want to discover, what you want to say about the images. So if we don't define a task specifically, we cannot say it's important to generalize, because it could be also not important to generalize between the two, because to task related to one specific domain. But for some tasks, for instance, understanding objects, which objects are inside an image, the algorithm should generalize because it's task of vision, as Valtteri said.
So Vector is having an interesting comment on how we can deal with atomic actions. He's saying if the atomic action is ambiguous, you can look at a set. I assume he means a sequence of fine-grained actions that is non-ambiguous. I don't know whether he's talking about the sequence or just grouping them into less ambiguous classes.
Yeah, I think he means more like how like wash might describe like the activity, but the pick up sponge, rub the sponge will describe the atomic.
Can we unmute perhaps?
Yeah, we can unmute Victor, I think, for allowed to talk. I think that does this. I hope it does that.
Hello.
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 We're kind of speculating what you mean. Maybe you can just tell us exactly what.
Yes, like no, that what I feel, I mean, like after participating is that the categories of the actions basically are verbs, right? So I mean, like, but we know that, for example, like a sequence of verbs, I mean, a pair of verb and nouns, a composition of all those pairs form an action, right? So maybe like, I mean, like, have you considered to annotate this? I mean, this compound, like basically like similar to what David Ross was mentioning, like, oh, shall we start to go to molecular actions?
Well, can you do an example?
Yes.
Yeah. So for example, yeah, sure, definitely. Like for example, you say chopping a tomato, chopping an onion, and after that, like for example, put it in the pan.
Yeah.
And that will be like, for example, for like in Colombia, that would be part of just one step of a recipe.
Yeah.
So you can go to WikiHow and see, like, for example, oh, I take a recipe from WikiHow and I want to actually like know when that particular step happened.
So it's interesting because the recipes don't talk about chopping the tomatoes and chopping the onions, right? They kind of go into
exactly.
Put the chopped onion in the pot, right?
That's the thing. Like, how can we merge them? I mean, like, do we need to annotate them? Do we need a new ontology? What do we need?
Yeah.
Like, how can we marry that fine-grained stuff with, high-level stuff that we humans care, right?
Yeah, it's so there are two aspects to this. One, we can say, which of these steps would someone mention as they want to write a recipe, right? So which of these are the ones that I would skip? I wouldn't say pick up the tomato, put down the tomato, and then cut the tomato, right? I will skip some of these as known or given. So that's an interesting kind of summarization, let's say, task, which we haven't looked into. What would be interesting. There is another aspect of this problem, which is the common and the uncommon. As in, there are lots of things that kind of are too common for us to worry about. The long tail aspect, right? There are these unique aspects which need particular attention. And I think that's something we continue to look into. How to make the test set. Currently, if you detect all the puts and takes, you probably are doing, I don't know, 50%, right? And these are like they're the less interesting ones. While if you detect deboning chicken, you probably are doing really well because you're doing something that is less common and hasn't been seen as often. So that's an aspect of evaluation metrics that I think always requires revisiting and thinking about, because we want to recognize what you're doing in terms of chopping onions, but there are these events either because they're important for the summarization or because they're rare and less obvious. And I think having a long tail data set that EPIC opens all these questions, it's just difficult to know how to make that step without having an ad hoc waiting, right? You don't want an ad hoc waiting.
Exactly.
You want something
also because the methods should scale in some sense on EPIC X, whatever rooms or domain is. Probably simple to have a wiki for recipients, but we don't know in other domain how difficult it could be try to have this kind of organization of actions and so on. So that's only the point. Well, Epic Kitchens is on kitchens, and probably we have not to overfit, let's say, in some sense, on this kind of.
Even though we don't have an actual measure of how much recipes there are in Epic Kitchens versus cleaning, laundry, putting stuff away, drying the dishes, things that won't even appear in a how-to because they are so basic and so standard, then you probably have learned them. So there are things that are not complex and not recipe oriented, but they are what we do on daily life. There is a question from Borga. How can we use 3D heuristic better for action recognition? Many of the existing datasets do not seem to provide 3D annotations for object environments, hands. Do we see future research going in that direction? This aspect of action recognition could also be crucial for many augmented reality applications. I think Walterio.
I missed the first part of the question.
So using
I do not see the questions. Oh, now
it's in the chat. How can we use 3D heuristics better for action recognition? And whether 3D is required for augmented reality applications. Perhaps my biased opinion of this when we started doing things like You Do I Learn is that humans don't need 3D arrows in space to know how to open a can. It depends who you're talking to and at what level the augmented reality is needed. But
so we have some work on this space. I'm not sure if I am capturing your question correctly, but if you're interested on alternative ways in which we can provide guidance, we have at least one paper which is called Glacier, ending in AR as in augmented reality, Glacier. And essentially what that work does is to try to emphasize the usefulness of short video guides in order to help you to do things. And this actually connects with the previous discussion, because the description of the world in terms of text is overrated, in my opinion. I mean, just trying to describe how you are going to debone a chicken or chop a tomato is an excruciating, almost useless task, unless you want to spend a significant amount of time trying to simplify the task so that it actually does not represent reality. You might be able to describe something as complex as that with text. But if we show you a 5-second clip about how you do it, then because of the way in which we're built, which taps into the motor mirror neurons, that if you see someone doing something, you can actually imitate that, and that has been quite central for the development of humanity and many other species actually. You can actually do much better trying to imitate rather than trying to artificially build models in 3D in order to explain how the world should be put together, or how you should fix something, or how to understand how to do something.
It's the central question of 2D or 3D. Where should we work? I think in an egocentric domain where the objects are at a relatively fixed distance from you as you use them, without millisecond accurate 3D, I'm not sure what 3D can give us. So this is not really looking at the world and seeing the things far. When you use the object, you have a particular distance to them as you use them. That's a fixed distance. So in my kind of current experience, I don't see 3D in ego for action recognition as being significant. Significantly important, unless it becomes super accurate that you will be able to model, I don't know, the needle in your hand with an accurate 3D, and then we can see what we can do with that. With the current method, I'm sure Morgan, everybody who'd kind of done the HoloLens, this is a great addition to be able to have these types of data to capture. We haven't played with it as much, so I think we're still waiting to see the potential of capturing things in 3D, both for augmented reality and for action recognition. We've done all 3D when we did record bits with the old kinetics.
RGBD.
Yeah, RGBD. With the level of accuracy, I don't think it was very tempting to look at these things, but things are changing. I think we can solve a lot with 2D. I'm yet to see what is the 5% needed that will require 3D.
I would like to add, maybe it depends on the 3D annotations that we might want to have. So for instance, if I think about HoloLens, what they try to do is to map the environment. And if you work in an environment and you know that the environment has some elements, maybe you may want to track them. You may want to know where things are. So for example, Giovanni and I are working with anticipation. If you know where objects are and what their status is, that can be very important. But yeah, I agree with Dima that maybe knowing with voxel precision what's going on in front of the camera, maybe that's not directly exploitable in a substantially different manner than just the RGB. But knowing what's around and how to map the surrounding, that might be an interesting signal.
It could be really a prior, or what's next. For instance, if you know also the geometry of the scene. But of course, it's very difficult to catch the geometry of the small, teeny objects, and as Dima said, probably is not needed.
Yeah.
But of course, for context, the depth for context should be very useful. Also for tracking not only what next, but also to understand where are you going, where are you. As localization, we are working on localization in Catania, and that signals is useful actually.
It's true what Victor is saying. That is of course critical if you want to map to a robot. Capturing the world in 3D is currently what robotics is about. However, there isn't anything that says robotics can't bridge from a 2D to a 3D if they recognize, that the tomato has been chopped. It's difficult to know where you need that bridging. And perhaps all the evidence is that you can now take an image and detect depth and kind of get a decent depth from it. Shows that at least using the current techniques, you might bypass most of these.
Yeah, if you can see a YouTube video doing anything and you can replicate that in 3D, it just shows that you are able to make that transfer.
Yeah.
So is it easier that you capture and try to process in 3D from the outset? That's a big question.
Yeah.
It could actually be hindering you. The fact that you're trying to process 3D in order to do 3D. Probably that also opens a more difficult path for you instead of going from 2D to 3D if you need to.
Yeah, I think it might be good to kind of end on a high with this active thing rather than let things fiddle.
Absolutely. So yeah, and also being respectful of people's times because they might have to go to other workshops and so on. But it has been a pleasure having everyone here in the workshop. We do have a new version of a new instance of the EPIC workshop, which is happening in ECCD. It will also be virtual, and please go to our website, which is on the let me just share my screen.
Iware computing.
Yes, Iware computing.
Your pixelated screen. Yes.
Oh, sorry. If someone has a better, can you see my screen?
Yes, I think that is readable. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So please go to our website. Well, this has the address of EPIC at CVPR, but if you just go to the main site, iware-computing.org, then you will have information not just about these two events, but also events in the past and things in the future. So with that, I think we can close our workshop. It has been a pleasure, as I said, having you all, and thank you very much to all the organizers of the workshop as well.
And all the attendees, thanks for being with us till the end.
Thank you.
And your contribution throughout.
Thank you. See you next edition. Ciao, ciao.
See you.
See you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for being here.
Bye. Thank you.